From broken van to empire. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of the strip mall parking lot as Ken Goodrich wiped the sweat from his forehead, leaving a dark streak across his work uniform. His service van, if you could even call it that, sat broken down beside him, steam rising from its overheated engine like a dying prayer to the desert sky. The transmission had finally given up, just like everything else in Ken's life seemed to be doing. It was July 15th, 2003, and Ken was 34 years old with exactly $200 in his checking account, a van that wouldn't start, and a reputation in Phoenix's HVAC industry as the guy who charged too little and worked too hard. His wife Sarah was 8 months pregnant with their second child, and the medical bills from her complicated pregnancy were piling up like monsoon clouds on the horizon. Maybe Dad was right, Ken muttered to himself, kicking at the gravel with his steel-toed boots. Maybe I should have just stayed at the dealership. Ken's father had been a successful car salesman who'd tried to steer his son toward the respectable profession of selling automobiles. Air conditioning repair is a dead-end job, his father had said countless times. You'll always be working with your hands, always be dirty, always be at the mercy of other people's emergencies. Smart people build businesses, Ken. They don't crawl around in attics fixing other people's problems. But Ken had never been able to shake the memory of being 10 years old, holding a flashlight for his father during those rare moments when the old man would try to fix something around the house. There was something magical about diagnosing a problem, understanding how systems worked, making broken things whole again. When other kids his age were playing video games, Ken was taking apart radios, rebuilding bicycle engines, and dreaming about the day he'd have his own tools and his own customers. Now, standing next to his broken-down van with his pregnant wife, waiting at home and creditors calling daily, those childhood dreams felt like the naive fantasies of a boy who didn't understand how the real world worked. The HVAC industry in Phoenix was dominated by big companies with fleets of matching trucks, expensive advertising budgets, and established relationships with contractors and property managers. Ken's little operation, if you could call it that, consisted of him, his dying van, a basic set of tools he'd bought at a pawn shop, and a cell phone with a number he'd printed on business cards at Kinko's. He charged $50 an hour for service calls, while the big companies charged $150. He thought he was being smart, undercutting the competition. Instead, he'd learned a devastating lesson about business psychology. When you charge too little, people assume your work is worth too little. You get what you pay for, customers would say, after calling one of the big companies instead of him. If this guy is charging $50, there must be something wrong with his work. Ken had tried everything to compete. He'd advertised in the Yellow Pages, burning through what little savings he had on ads that generated maybe 2 or 3 calls a month. He distributed flyers in neighborhoods, only to watch them blow away in the desert wind or get thrown in trash cans. He'd even tried door-to-door sales, explaining to homeowners that he could service their air conditioning units for less money than the big guys. But Phoenix residents weren't interested in saving money on HVAC's repairs. They were interested in reliability, professionalism, and the peace of mind that comes with hiring a company that's been around for decades. Ken's handwritten invoices and business cards that were obviously printed at a copy shop didn't inspire confidence in people whose air conditioning failures could mean the difference between comfort and genuine health risks in Arizona's brutal summer heat. The breaking point had come the week before, when Ken had finally landed what seemed like a significant job, servicing the HVAC systems for a small office complex. The property manager, a sharp woman named Lisa Rodriguez, had been impressed by Ken's technical knowledge and his willingness to work for about half what the established companies charged. "You really know your stuff," she'd said, after Ken had diagnosed and fixed a complex problem with their central air system that two other companies had misidentified. "And your prices are incredibly reasonable. I think we might have found our new HVAC guy." Ken had left that job site feeling like he'd finally gotten his breakthrough. A commercial account could mean steady work, regular income, maybe even referrals to other property managers. He'd driven home that night singing along to the radio, already planning how he'd use the steady income to fix his van, maybe even buy some better tools. But when he'd called Lisa the following week to schedule routine maintenance on the building's other units, she'd been polite but firm. "Ken, I'm sorry, but we've decided to go with Arizona Comfort Systems. They're more expensive, but our building owners are more comfortable with an established company. You understand." Ken understood, all right. He understood that in business, being good at the work wasn't enough. Being cheaper wasn't enough. Being willing to work harder than everyone else wasn't enough. Success required something he didn't have: credibility, systems, and the kind of professional presence that made customers feel safe investing their money in trust. That night, Ken had sat at his kitchen table with Sarah, spreading out their bills like tarot cards that predicted financial doom. The mortgage payment was due in 12 days. The electric bill was 2 weeks overdue. Sarah's obstetrician wanted payment for the upcoming delivery before she'd even set foot in the hospital. "Maybe I should get a job," Sarah had said quietly, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "After the baby comes, I could work part-time somewhere. Help bring in some steady income." The suggestion had cut through Ken like a blade. His wife was about to give birth to their second child, and instead of being able to provide for his family, he was forcing her to consider working to keep them afloat. "No," Ken had said, his voice harder than he'd intended. "That's not happening. I'm going to figure this out." But as he stood next to his broken van in that parking lot, figuring it out felt impossible. The van would cost at least $800 to fix, money he didn't have. Even if he could repair it, he'd still be the cheap guy in a market that didn't want cheap. He'd still be the one-man operation trying to compete against companies with dozens of technicians, millions in equipment, and marketing budgets bigger than his annual income. That's when Ken's phone rang. "Ken, this is Mrs. Patterson from last month. You remember? You fixed our upstairs unit?" Ken remembered. Mrs. Patterson was a sweet, elderly woman whose air conditioning had failed during a particularly brutal heat wave. The big companies had told her it would be 3 days before they could get a technician out to her house. Ken had dropped everything and fixed her system the same afternoon. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. How can I help you?" "Well, our downstairs unit is acting up now, and I was wondering if you could take a look at it. But also I wanted to ask, my neighbor saw your truck at our house and asked for your number. She's been having problems with her air conditioning for weeks, and the company she called wants to charge her $4,000 for a new system. Could you take a look at hers too?" Ken looked at his broken van, then at the Arizona sun that would make air conditioning repairs urgent and valuable for at least 4 more months of the year. "Mrs. Patterson, I'll be right over." 45 minutes later, Ken was riding in the passenger seat of a taxi toward Mrs. Patterson's neighborhood, his tool bag in his lap, and a crazy idea forming in his mind. The taxi ride cost him $22, money he couldn't really afford to spend. But as they drove through the suburban neighborhoods of Phoenix, Ken was seeing the city differently. Every house they passed had air conditioning units. Most of them were older models that would need regular maintenance and eventual replacement. The desert climate that made Phoenix barely livable without air conditioning also made HVAC services absolutely essential, not optional. The big companies in town were successful, but they were also complacent. They charged premium prices because they could get away with it, not because they provided premium service. They scheduled appointments weeks in advance because demand always exceeded supply. They treated customers like numbers on spreadsheets instead of human beings whose comfort and health depended on properly functioning cooling systems. What if someone could provide the technical expertise of the big companies, the responsiveness that customers desperately wanted, and the personal service that made people feel valued instead of processed? What if someone could figure out how to look professional and established without actually being either? What if someone was crazy enough to bet everything on the idea that superior service could overcome every other disadvantage? Mrs. Patterson's downstairs unit had a simple refrigerant leak that took Ken 30 minutes to diagnose and fix. Her neighbor's broken system turned out to need nothing more than a thorough cleaning and a minor electrical repair, work that took 2 hours and saved the customer $3,800 compared to the full replacement quote she'd received. Both women insisted on paying Ken immediately, and both asked if he had business cards to share with their friends. As Ken sat in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, accepting a glass of iced tea and listening to both women praise his technical skill and customer service, the crazy idea crystallized into something that felt like destiny. He was going to start over, not just fix his existing business, start completely over with a new approach that turned his apparent weaknesses into competitive advantages. That night, Ken sat down with Sarah and outlined a plan that sounded insane to anyone who understood the HVAC industry in Phoenix. He was going to create a company that looked and felt like the established players, but operated with the hunger and flexibility of a startup. He was going to charge premium prices for premium service, position himself as the high-end alternative instead of the budget option. Most importantly, he was going to build systems and processes that could scale beyond just him doing the work. "Ken," Sarah said gently, "we have $200. The van doesn't work. You don't have employees, equipment, or even a business name. How are you going to compete with companies that have been around for 20 years? Ken's answer would become the foundation of everything that followed. Because they've been around for 20 years doing the same things the same way. They've gotten comfortable, slow, and expensive. I'm going to be uncomfortable, fast, and valuable." The transformation began with Ken spending $40 of their last $160 on business registration and a fictitious business name, Arizona Climate Masters. The name suggested expertise, local knowledge, and mastery. Everything Ken wanted potential customers to think about when they saw his advertising. The next $60 went toward professional business cards and letterhead designed at a local print shop. Ken studied the marketing materials of the most successful HVAC companies in town, noting every detail of their branding, their messaging, their pricing structures. Then he created materials that looked just as professional, but positioned Arizona Climate Masters as the premium alternative for customers who wanted expertise, not just service calls. The remaining $60 became his marketing budget. But instead of buying Yellow Pages ads or distributing flyers, Ken invested in what would become his secret weapon: information. He spent 2 full days at the library, using their computers and internet access to research every HVAC company in Phoenix. He found their customer reviews, their pricing information, their service areas. More importantly, he found their weaknesses: slow response times, poor communication, sales-heavy approaches that left customers feeling pressured and undervalued. Ken also researched something most HVAC entrepreneurs never considered: the psychology of premium positioning. He studied luxury brands and other industries, learning how companies like Mercedes-Benz and Rolex charged more money not by being cheaper, but by being demonstrably better. The breakthrough insight came when Ken realized that HVAC services in Phoenix weren't really about air conditioning repair. They were about security, comfort, and peace of mind in a climate where cooling system failures could be genuinely dangerous. People didn't want the cheapest HVAC service. They wanted the most reliable, most trustworthy, most competent service. They wanted to feel confident that their investment would solve their problems permanently, not temporarily. Ken's new strategy flipped everything he'd been doing wrong. Instead of competing on price, he'd compete on value. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, he'd specialize in being the best solution for customers who wanted premium service. Instead of looking like a small operation trying to grow, he'd look like an established company that happened to be small enough to provide personal attention. The first test of this new approach came when Ken borrowed his brother-in-law's pickup truck and drove to Mrs. Patterson's neighborhood with a simple value proposition. He was offering comprehensive HVAC system evaluations that the big companies charged $200 for, and he was doing them for free. But there was a catch. Ken only offered these free evaluations to homeowners who were genuinely interested in ensuring their air conditioning systems would run efficiently and reliably for years to come. He wasn't looking for customers who wanted quick fixes or Band-Aid solutions. He was looking for customers who understood that proper HVAC maintenance was an investment in their property and their family's comfort. The psychology was brilliant. Instead of positioning himself as the desperate guy who needed work, Ken positioned himself as the selective expert who only worked with serious customers. Instead of competing for everyone's business, he was qualifying customers before he'd even take their calls. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 weeks, Ken had performed 15 comprehensive system evaluations. 8 of those evaluations revealed significant problems that other companies had missed or ignored. 5 resulted in complete system replacements that generated more revenue than Ken had made in the previous 6 months combined. But more importantly, Ken was learning valuable lessons about business psychology that would shape everything he built. Premium customers don't just pay more money. They're actually easier to work with. They value expertise over discounts. They refer friends who are also premium customers. They view service providers as partners rather than vendors. Positioning yourself as the premium option doesn't just increase your prices. It increases customer satisfaction. When people pay more for a service, they have higher expectations, but they also have more patience and appreciation when those expectations are exceeded. Building a premium brand isn't about having premium resources. It's about creating premium experiences. Ken's borrowed pickup truck and basic tool set could provide the same quality of service as the big company's fleets and warehouses, but only if every customer interaction reinforced the message that Arizona Climate Masters delivered superior value. Within 3 months, Ken had earned enough money to buy a used van that didn't break down, professional uniforms that made him look like he worked for an established company, and diagnostic equipment that let him solve problems other technicians missed. More importantly, he developed a systematic approach to customer service that created raving fans instead of satisfied customers. Every service call began with a comprehensive system analysis, not just addressing the immediate problem. Ken explained not just what was wrong, but why it had happened and how to prevent similar problems in the future. He provided written recommendations that homeowners could use to make informed decisions about maintenance and upgrades. Ken also instituted a follow-up system that no other HVAC company in Phoenix was using. He called every customer 3 days after completing work to ensure their system was performing properly and to address any questions or concerns. These follow-up calls consistently led to referrals, additional work, and the kind of customer loyalty that can't be purchased with advertising. But the real breakthrough came when Ken realized he could scale his impact without scaling his time commitment. Instead of just fixing air conditioning problems, Ken began educating his customers about how their systems worked, why maintenance mattered, and how they could maximize efficiency and longevity. These educational conversations consistently led to larger projects, ongoing maintenance contracts, and customers who understood the value of working with a true expert instead of just a repair service. Ken also began partnering with local real estate agents, home inspectors, and property managers who needed reliable HVAC expertise for their clients. These partnerships created steady referral streams and positioned Arizona Climate Masters as the go-to resource for anyone in Phoenix who needed serious air conditioning expertise. Within 6 months of his van breaking down in that parking lot, Ken's business had fundamentally changed. He was no longer the cheap guy competing for scraps. He was the premium expert who commanded top prices because his customers understood they were receiving superior value. But Ken's biggest realization was that he hadn't just built a better HVAC service business. He'd learned principles of premium positioning, customer psychology, and value creation that could be applied to any industry. This realization led to Ken's next major decision. Instead of just growing Arizona Climate Masters, he would create multiple companies that applied these same principles to different aspects of the HVAC and home services industries. The expansion began with Ken noticing that many of his customers had problems beyond just air conditioning. Heating systems that were inefficient, electrical issues that affected HVAC performance, and plumbing problems that impacted overall home comfort. Instead of referring these customers to other companies, Ken began developing expertise in related areas and offering comprehensive home comfort solutions. Arizona Climate Masters became the foundation of what would eventually become a multi-company empire. Specialized divisions for heating, electrical work, plumbing, and even home generator installation. Each division followed the same premium positioning strategy that had made the original HVAC business successful. But Ken's real innovation was developing systems and processes that allowed each company to operate efficiently while maintaining the personal touch and technical expertise that customers valued. He created training programs for technicians, customer service scripts that ensured consistent experiences, and operational systems that could deliver premium results without requiring Ken to personally handle every job. The success of this approach became undeniable when Ken realized that Arizona Climate Masters and its sister companies were not just competing with other local HVAC services. They were setting standards that other companies had to match or exceed. Within 2 years, Ken's companies had developed reputations as the premium providers in Phoenix's home services market. Customers would specifically request the Arizona Climate Masters guy, even when they were dealing with other companies. Real estate agents would recommend Ken's companies to their high-end clients. Property managers would pay premium rates because they knew the work would be done right the first time. But the real validation came when established competitors began trying to copy Ken's approach, offering free system evaluations, emphasizing customer education, positioning themselves as premium alternatives to traditional HVAC services. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, Sarah told Ken one evening, as they reviewed the financial statements that showed their companies had generated over $2 million in revenue during their second full year of operation. But more importantly, it proves that you were right about something everyone else thought was crazy. Ken's response captured the essence of his transformation from struggling repair technician to successful entrepreneur. The crazy part wasn't thinking I could compete with the big companies. The crazy part was thinking I should compete with them instead of creating something completely different. The something completely different that Ken created would eventually grow far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. By year 5, Ken's companies had established themselves as the premium leaders in Phoenix's home services market. But Ken had begun to see opportunities beyond just serving individual customers. Commercial properties, industrial facilities, and large residential developments all needed the same kind of expert HVAC services that had made Arizona Climate Masters successful. The expansion into commercial services required significant investments in equipment, personnel, and expertise, but it also created opportunities for the kind of large-scale projects that could generate more revenue in a single contract than Ken's original business had made in entire years. Ken's first major commercial contract came when a large shopping center needed complete HVAC system replacement across multiple buildings. The project manager had worked with Ken's company on smaller jobs and understood that Arizona Climate Masters' premium approach wasn't just about higher prices. It was about superior results that protected property investments and minimized long-term maintenance costs. The shopping center project led to other commercial opportunities: office buildings, retail chains, industrial facilities, and eventually large-scale residential developments that needed hundreds of units serviced by a single company. Each commercial contract reinforced the same lesson Ken had learned from his early residential customers. Premium clients appreciate premium service, and they're willing to pay for results that protect their investments and minimize their risks. But commercial success also revealed new opportunities for growth that Ken hadn't considered. maintenance contracts, system monitoring services, energy efficiency consulting, and even financing programs that helped customers afford premium equipment and services. These additional revenue streams transformed Ken's companies from project-based businesses into subscription-based service providers with predictable income, ongoing customer relationships, and opportunities for continuous growth. The financial results spoke for themselves. By year 7, Ken's companies were generating over $15 million in annual revenue across multiple divisions and service areas. Ken employed over 60 technicians and support staff, operated a fleet of professional service vehicles, and had established Arizona Climate Masters as one of the most recognized brands in Phoenix's home services industry. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real story was in the transformation of how Phoenix residents and businesses thought about HVAC services. Before Ken's companies raised the bar, HVAC services were seen as necessary evils, expensive, disruptive, and often unsatisfactory experiences that customers endured when their systems failed. Ken's companies had turned HVAC services into partnerships where customers felt educated, valued, and confident in their service providers. This transformation created value that extended far beyond individual transactions. Ken's customers became advocates who referred friends, family members, and business associates. They renewed maintenance contracts year after year. They chose Ken's companies for new construction and renovation projects. Most importantly, they paid premium prices without complaint because they understood they were receiving premium value. The ultimate validation of Ken's approach came when private equity investors began approaching him about buying his companies. The offers were substantial, enough money to secure his family's financial future for generations, but they also forced Ken to confront what success actually meant to him. These investors see what you've built as a platform for aggressive expansion, one consultant told Ken during a meeting about potential sale terms. They want to take your systems and processes and replicate them in other markets. Phoenix could become the test case for a national home services empire. Ken spent months considering the possibilities. Selling would mean financial security, but it would also mean losing control over the companies he'd built from nothing. Expanding nationally could create enormous wealth, but it would also require compromising some of the personal touches and local expertise that had made his company successful in Phoenix. The decision came down to a simple question. What kind of legacy did Ken want to create? His answer shaped everything that followed. Instead of selling his companies or expanding beyond what he could personally manage, Ken decided to become a model for other entrepreneurs who wanted to build premium service businesses in their own markets. Ken began sharing his story through industry conferences, business publications, and eventually a consulting practice that helped other HVAC entrepreneurs apply his premium positioning principles to their own companies. The consulting work revealed that Ken's success wasn't unique to Phoenix or even to the HVAC industry. The principles of premium positioning, customer education, and value-based pricing could be applied successfully in any service business where technical expertise and customer trust were important. Ken worked with plumbing companies in Denver, electrical contractors in Atlanta, and even landscaping businesses in California, helping them transform from price-competitive commodity providers into premium service specialists who commanded top prices in their markets. Each consulting success reinforced the same lesson. Most service businesses fail not because they lack technical competence, but because they don't understand how to create and communicate value that customers are willing to pay premium prices to receive. Technical skills get you started, Ken would tell audiences of aspiring entrepreneurs. But business skills, understanding customer psychology, creating systems, building brands, those skills determine whether you build a job for yourself or a business that can succeed without you. Today, more than 20 years after his van broke down in that Phoenix parking lot, Ken's companies generate over $40 million in annual revenue across multiple service lines and geographic areas. He employs over 200 people, has trained hundreds of entrepreneurs through his consulting practice, and has established foundations that provide scholarships for young people interested in pursuing careers in skilled trades. But when Ken reflects on his journey from struggling repair technician to successful entrepreneur, he doesn't focus on the financial results or business achievements. The real success, he says, was learning that you don't have to accept the limitations that other people try to place on you. Everyone told me that HVAC repair was a dead-end job, that competing with established companies was impossible, that customers would always choose the cheapest option. What I learned was that people don't really want cheap. They want value. They want to feel confident in their decisions. They want to work with people who understand their problems and can solve them permanently, not temporarily. When you figure out how to create real value for people and communicate that value effectively, price becomes secondary. Customers will pay premium rates for premium results because they understand they're making investments, not just purchases. The man who once charged $50 an hour because he thought low prices were his only competitive advantage learned to command premium rates because he understood that expertise, reliability, and customer care were far more valuable than discounts. Ken's story proves that transforming a struggling service business into a thriving enterprise doesn't require special resources, unique advantages, or revolutionary innovations. It requires understanding customer psychology, creating systematic approaches to service delivery, and having the courage to position yourself as a premium provider instead of competing on price. Most importantly, it requires refusing to accept that your current situation defines your ultimate potential. The broken-down van in the parking lot that felt like the end of everything turned out to be the beginning of everything that mattered. Sometimes the moments that seem like failures are actually opportunities to completely reimagine what's possible. The question isn't whether you'll face moments that feel like endings. The question is whether you'll have the vision to see them as beginnings, the courage to try a completely different approach, and the persistence to prove that premium value can overcome every apparent disadvantage. From $200 and a broken van to $40 million in annual revenue and a business empire, Ken's story demonstrates that success isn't about starting with advantages. It's about learning to create advantages from whatever circumstances you face.